Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of What Fulfills You. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host. And if it's your first time tuning in, welcome. You are coming in on a very personal episode. And this topic is something that I wanted to wait a while before I really spoke about it, particularly on my podcast platform. And at whatever point this is being published, it means that I feel ready to finally speak more about it and to share some insights and just my overall personal experience around relationships, and in particular, a previous relationship. And I will kind of preface that the main reason why I talk about these personal experiences is kind of for two reasons. Number one, because when I have heard from others and their personal experiences, it has always helped me feel a little more sane, a little bit more understood, more normal. And also, I think it's such a reminder that this is part of the human experience and it is okay. And like many of us, we find ways to navigate it and just go through life, you know? And for me personally, I would say that I grew up with a lot of Western cultural values, but my parents, in particular, my mom, she has still a lot of Vietnamese cultural values. And part of that, to my understanding, is often more about saving face and not being as vulnerable and as open and candid as I am on this podcast. And through observing that, I realized that by withholding the things that you've experienced, the good and the bad, you also prevent yourself from gaining really deep connection and meaningful conversations with other people. And so that is why I am finally chatting more about a recent relationship experience on today's episode. And my hope is that in sharing little bits of this personal experience, if you're listening, this can bring some sort of understanding to you or a feeling of being understood, or just hearing like someone else also experiencing some of the things. I hope in some shape or form it just makes you feel better in some way. But for those of you who didn't know, because I also am not always that public about my relationships and who I'm dating, how long I'm dating, whatever. I was previously in a relationship for just a little over 2 years. And it's been some time now since that relationship ended, hence why I'm feeling more comfortable to talk about it now, to kind of just like slowly unravel things that I think are relevant to you guys listening. But as I have been reflecting on that experience, I can say with a lot of certainty that the things that I just kind of raised eyebrows about in the beginning are still relevant to this day. And what I mean by that is a couple things. I think number one, the things that I felt a little concerned about in the beginning, I still feel concerned about, or I still would have felt concerned about had I continued on in the relationship. And the other part is that while I tried to apply a growth mindset to the person and the dynamic and like how that, I guess in other words, I'm trying to say like people's circumstances or what they've done in their past and whatever does not always indicate the person's future or the trajectory, right? I am a firm believer in that. And again, this very much stems from having a growth mindset. But I will say that I can hold that mentality and that mindset, but the application of it still falls on the actual person. And there is a difference between someone having that mindset and actually applying it. And I would say, for my personal experience, I held on to the mindset part a lot more. And I held on to the belief that the actions were coming and evolving. And I think in some ways they did, but in a lot of ways it didn't. And I want to add to that too, that it doesn't mean that I think poorly or negatively of the person. However, and maybe this is relatable to you listening if you've ever experienced it, or maybe you're experiencing it at some point, but there's a level of disappointment that I don't know even how to explain, but it's almost like when you believe in someone almost more than they really believe in themselves, whether it's conscious or not, it is kind of disappointing, right? And to be fair, I find this, in my head at least, that this is separate from betting on someone's potential. For me, I think it was simply the fact that I gave too much benefit of the doubt for something that wasn't snap of a finger clear. For example, what I mean by that is when I think of some of my closest male friends and their friends and so forth, without even having to blink twice, I can tell you exactly the type of person they are, their temperament, their behavioral habits. Like I can not only like tell you without second guessing myself, but I could say that about their closest friends as well, whether I've met them once, twice, or maybe even never at all. And I always actually questioned myself. I was like, do I just have a biased view? Did I just get lucky, right? Like I would start to like question my experiences with that. I would start to question how, oh, maybe I'm just too black and white. And that's actually right there. While it's a great quality to have to like really look internally to, make sure I don't have my own confirmation bias, that is a great quality. At the same time, it can be not a great asset when you are navigating or dealing with someone that doesn't deserve that extended benefit of the doubt or, extra compassion and whatever, because it ends up coming at a cost to you. And when it starts to come at a cost to your time, to your emotions, to your investment on all different ways, that's very costly, right? So I ultimately found myself giving a person the benefit of the doubt while also feeling internally conflicted by that because I didn't feel, for whatever reason, that same level of this person is incapable of that or this person would never do that. And that's tough. Like, that's really tough on the self. And, I think looking back now and speaking from the experience, I gotta say that you can make your life a lot easier if and when you are surrounded by people that just simply, without question, embody the qualities and attributes that you are looking for and that you also embody. And so for me, I know that about myself very well, like that what you see is what you get. And there are no second guesses with me. There are no doubts with how I'm going to show up, how I behave. It's very consistent. And this also took a lot of time in my life too, throughout my 20s. Like I developed these traits, right? Like there were times where I can't say like 9 years ago I was this way. I mean, I know 9 years is a long time, but I'm thinking back to my, freshman year of college and whatever, like I definitely grew and evolved. And so I'm not saying that like people are just born like this, but for sure, I think I would have done myself a bit of a favor if I just accepted that my observations and what I'm feeling inside is not a black and white view, and to not judge myself for it, but to rather like trust myself and also recognize that there is a fine line between, who you love more. Like my my friend Ronnie, my dear friend Ronnie, he would always tell me, especially in times where I was struggling with certain decisions, he always reminded me that Emily loves Emily more. And he would remind me about, my future self and what she would think and what she would want. And just that aspect of loving that person, that version of me, and doing whatever is best for that person and keeping her in mind. And, he's the type of friend that would call me out in other, from many years ago, if I wasn't considerate of another person or if I wasn't being as considerate as I could be. And so I know this friend would call me out if I was being too black and white, for example, but he certainly was calling me out instead at a certain point that I was overextending my compassion and my empathy. And this can be the case if you are more of an empath and you are someone that really tries your best to understand others and include other people, like that kind of thing. And funny enough, I actually realized in my own life experiences and reflections as well that I kind of swung too far on the pendulum where earlier in my life, if anything, I was more black and white, maybe not as inclusive, and a little bit, I would have written certain people off right away when it came to dating. And I think somehow along the way, I got in my head about that. I didn't want to be the kind of person that wrote people off for whatever reason because I didn't want to come across as like judgmental or whatever, right? Like I don't know how it got in my head, but because of it, I swung really far to the other side and then became ultimately too open and too compassionate and too open-minded that it came at a cost to my own emotional stability, quite literally. And funny enough, a while ago, I remember my therapist had mentioned to me that something along the lines of, if your goal is to be monogamous with one long-term partner in your future, Emily, it's okay to be very selective as to who you partner up with. And hearing that felt so reassuring because I recognized that I had gotten in my own head about whether I was writing people off unfairly. And the truth was, I really wasn't ever. And I think now I can see myself being a lot more middle ground where I'm still open-minded, but I'm also a lot more firm in how much flexibility I have for the most important things. And when it comes to values, I would say that it's just something that I have to feel in my gut from the get-go that this person already lives this way. There's nothing that makes me feel a little bit on edge or a little bit cautious or guarded. And it's essentially the same way that I feel with like my closest friends, guys and girls. It's this level of knowing. There's no logic to explain it. Compared to someone that's growing into that person or growing into those values. It's like that should already be there when we meet. And look, if you are the kind of person that's open-minded like I was and you are able to take a chance on that, like totally, right? But I will say from personal experience, actual lived experience, I think one of the key indicators that a person is able to radically change from, again, I was this example. It takes something drastic to happen that shakes your world so much that you are faced with only two options. You keep going as is, or you radically change and you radically evolve into a different and better person, like a more suitable serving person for yourself, for the sake of who you want to be and for the sake of the life you want. Looking back on my romantic experience, the first breakup I ever went through was at the age of 20, and that boyfriend and I, we were living together and we had a dog together, and I was only a sophomore in college, about to be a junior, and we broke up over the summer, and he had just graduated and I was transferring universities. And that breakup shook my world so much because I relied on him a lot emotionally. I also didn't really have any friends to support me at the time, or to just talk to or spend quality time with. And I also just didn't have the sense of self that I have now. Again, I was 20, so I think a lot of that makes sense because the person, he had ended the relationship because of my own, I would say there was a lot of volatility in like my reactions and all that kind of stuff, right? Like I was just a very underdeveloped young adult, and this person was, I would say, more secure, more stable, pretty grounded and patient in a lot of ways. Again, with his own shortcomings, but like again, from that age, like I was 19, he was 21, 21, 22. Like, yeah, I think that my 19-year-old volatility or my 20-year-old volatility at the time was just like it got to a place where it was too much. And that's why he ended the relationship. And that loss was so difficult on me that I just I did a complete 180, and I started reading about mindset, and that's when I picked up the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. I remember it vividly, walking into Barnes and Noble at Fashion Island in Newport Beach, and I was so determined. And I also started listening to Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, Ray Dalio, like a lot of amazing thought leaders that I just sharpened my mind. I became more stoic in a very good way, especially for the person that I was at the time. And I started surrounding myself with women, with girls from the school that I transferred to, Chapman, with girls that just were on track to be the types of girls that I wanted to be around, like values wise, like selfless and honest and integrity and all of these things. And so I really did a 180 as a person because of a really big loss for me. Like that was a big loss at that chapter of my life. And later on, like that partner and I, we ended up getting back together, I think 7 or 8 months later. But I honestly can fully acknowledge that I would not have evolved and have grown the way I did had that person not ended the relationship at the time and place that he did. It was extremely difficult. It was extremely heartbreaking, but it was important for me to experience in order to not only be a more developed and wise person, but also to get to this place in my life now where experiences like this, where like an end of a relationship, I have more experience under my belt now, like it's I know, for example, I know that I've been through this before, so I can get through it again. Um, but I will say, funny enough, as I speak about this out loud, and I don't have a full outline for this episode, but as I speak about this out loud, I think about a significant difference that I had in my relationship experiences where, again, something really good for me to have under my belt, that the person I dated all of college compared to my last relationship. I might have been 18 when I met my college boyfriend, but there was a lot of intuitive, just like, I know this is right feeling. And I never recalled having major doubts about like the person's character and the way they are and my ability to rely on them and like just who they are, how they live, like all of that. It was so black and white clear that I never second guessed or doubted that person and who they said they were. Um, why that relationship ultimately ended up ending is because we just truly wanted different things in life. And I've also seen that come to fruition in terms of how we've lived our lives very differently over the past 6 years since that relationship officially ended. And I will say that's something that I reflected on with time and in comparison to my last relationship, because I remember thinking, okay, this isn't what I felt in my first relationship. Why? And I was really lucky to have that comparison. And it's not because, and again, obviously, you don't ever want to compare, like every partner is going to be different and you're going to feel different things. But in terms of that inner confidence and inner trust of being able to rely on a person, not only short term, but long term. Like when I say long term, I'm thinking if you choose this person as your partner, how are they going to show up in your life 10 years from now? I remember my college best friend, for example, she told me, Emily, if this is happening now, think about what it might look like when 10 years from now and you guys are married and you have your first child and you're sitting at breakfast and that happens, right? And that right there really had me thinking. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like that is actually concerning and I wouldn't want to be experiencing that 10 years from now, you know? And I think that's a great framework as well when you are dating, if you're in a relationship or if you're reflecting on a past one, thinking about the dynamic and each person's ability to come together as a team to solve problems. I'm obviously very aware that every relationship is going to have obstacles that you have to navigate, and there will be, like I expect that actually. Like I expect it to not be perfect. But if I had to guess, someone that is willing to solve the problem with you versus imply you're the problem or imply that it's more of your fault or etc. Like when they're not being as logical about it when it comes to conflict resolution, I would bet the person who's able to come together as a team is going to be a more helpful and reliable and stable partner for the long run. And again, this also depends on your goals, but I would say for myself, again, especially when it comes to what fulfills you and building a fulfilling and meaningful life, I do believe that foundationally, who you select as your long-term life partner, hopefully, is not only the most important relationship you will have, but also one that will deeply impact your life in so many ways. It's funny because before I started recording this, I saw some quote, I think, from Emily Ratajkowski. I think that's how you say her last name. The very beautiful actress, whatever, or model. I saw somewhere that she quoted about how like having a child with the wrong man will ruin a woman's life so much, or something to that extent. And I've seen that kind of frequently. I have seen concepts of that where it's like, yeah, having a child or trying to build a family with like the wrong person or like a woman's like for a woman like being single is less of an issue than being with the wrong person and being with the wrong male partner. And I believe that so full-heartedly, which is why it did concern me that I had to even think about some of those things when it came to the long-term fit with the last partner. And obviously, it goes without saying, it's not that the relationship was completely misaligned, because there was a lot of aspects that were very, very aligned. However, I think the things that were kind of like eyebrow raising for me were more difficult to resolve than other things that could be easier to resolve. And I think most importantly, just that aspect of feeling really concerned with how this could and would play out 10, 15, 20 years from now. I didn't love that I was unsure. And I actually recently had the last episode, I had on a guest, Lauren Mackler, who's the co-founder and CEO of Co-Fertility. She talked about it in our recording on how you should not have any doubt about the person that you are with. And going back to the beginning of this episode, the eyebrow raises, the slight doubt, the concerns, like the things that I already felt, and was also, to be fair to, not only did I feel, but it was like the first time I was exposed to some of these things that I had seen or someone had experienced in their life. You know, I kind of was like, "Oh, wow, like that's, that does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, right?" But then I actually talked myself out of it, because I said to myself, "Well, you can't write someone off just because of this, or, you gotta be open-minded." And again, all of that is true and good, but you really have to sit with yourself, and again, only something that you can answer for yourself. At what cost? At what cost does it come to for me? And is it worth it, right? Like, is it worth being the guinea pig, is kind of how it felt like for me. Like, is it worth being the first person that this person is showing up for in this way? And compared to, this is how this person has always been in past relationships and past life experiences. It's tough, right? Because we're just imperfect humans, but ultimately you do have to look out for yourself, and you have to think long and hard about your future self and what that woman needs and wants, and what kind of person helps her feel her best. And what's funny about this is that if you bring yourself into circles of people, and again, this is probably especially in the romantic area, but if you do that and you're in the circles of people who share and embody the values that you live by, and similar mindsets and lifestyle and background experiences, all of it, it suddenly just makes more sense again. I don't know how to explain it, but if you've experienced this, you probably know what I mean. But it's like you're coming back to that sense of self again. You're coming back home to who you've always been. And for me personally, in my experience, it was me stretching myself too far away from home that became very apparent, right? Like, you start to feel yourself stretching yourself a little too thin. And that was me trying my best to be as open-minded as I could be, which is a great attribute for anyone to have. But again, to not over repeat myself, but quite literally, it will come at a cost to you, to your sense of self, to your individuality, to your values, and all of it. And it was a great feeling when I finally was around people that really admired and respected who I am, what I do, my just like who I am as a person, quite literally. I also had a good friend with me who was present in that moment, and she was able to articulate that back to me as well. Like, she saw it in real time. Like, she saw someone who was genuinely deeply admiring me for who I am. And I'll never forget when she spoke to me. She's like, this is exactly what you were looking for. This was what you wanted, like someone that understood you and uplifted you for that. Like that didn't make you feel like you should shrink or that you're too much in any way. In fact, it was like really lifted up, like like almost like on a pedestal, but like not in a too much way, but just like a wow, these are awesome qualities about you. That is so cool. And I think when you do the same, if you have experienced this coming from any dynamic that made you start to question your sense of self a little bit, and you go back into environments that really, really are just the core of you and the types of people you should be around because that just makes the most sense for you, you'll probably feel that feeling. And that epiphany will probably click as well. Like you will kind of see it almost in a more logical way because it's going to be so blatantly obvious in front of you that this is the type of respect and treatment you deserve. And it's funny because it's all really connected in that my psychologist, my therapist, he said the same thing to me. Once I finally asked him like what he felt like I was compromising, I think ultimately he felt that I was compromising a sense of self and who I was as a person. And he actually made note too that he felt like I was shrinking in a lot of ways to accommodate another person. I think it really killed him to observe how I would slowly shrink myself in ways that I had never done before. And because it got to a point where it was too much, that shrinking became so obvious to me. That's when I realized like I can't because I'm just no longer fully my best self. And it helps when you have incredible friends who have known you for a long time that can even point that out too or can, call it out. But um, I remember months later after the relationship ended, I had several friends who hadn't seen me in maybe a few weeks at a time would see me and all individually would tell me, wow, you look different, or wow, you are glowing different. And without a lot of context, actually, because I would kind of keep some of these things to myself and would start to reveal it as I felt ready to talk about it. And it was crazy that many people noticed a difference in my skin, a difference in my energy, and all of the things. And I'm so grateful for that. And if I could recommend anything, it's to always make sure you pour into those relationships, those sisters and brothers, whatever, whether it's literally or figuratively. Like I have both, but quite literally, my closest girlfriends are like sisters to me. My closest guy friends are truly like brothers to me. And to have them remind me who they know me as has been the biggest gift because it was like the universe was trying to nudge me in so many ways that there is something off and don't let yourself keep going down this route because you don't deserve to. And the longer you prolong something that isn't you, the longer it'll take to get back. So that is all I have for today's solo episode on my last relationship experience. I'm sure I will talk more about this as time goes on, but this is something that I wanted to just slowly share and be as candid as I could while also being as respectful as I can. But all that to say, I hope this was helpful in some shape or form and truly If you are navigating the end of a chapter, whether it's a relationship or something similar, that this message resonated with you, please share with me. I love when you guys chat with me on Instagram. You can DM me on the podcast Instagram at What Fulfills You or my personal Instagram at Emily E. Duong. Both are linked in the show notes. And you can also read more on Substack. It is just whatfulfillsyou.substack.com. There are a lot of different articles I've written on self-care, to relationships, to just mindset, all the things. So if you like to see some of this in written form, you can find more at the Substack. Everything, again, is linked in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I would chat with you all in the next one.